Souhegan Valley Rail Trail informational webinar. I'm Matt Watkins. I'll be one of your co-hosts tonight. So for tonight's event, webinar attendees can submit questions by clicking on the Q&A button, and questions will be answered as best we can at the end of the presentation. Only presenters are able to speak or be seen tonight. And just sort of in advance, if you'd like to join the effort that we are going to be explaining tonight, you can visit souheganvalleyrailtrail.org/join. And you can also feel free to reach out to us by email, info@souheganvalleyrailtrail.org. So go ahead, Chris. Yeah, so for tonight, again, I'm Matt Watkins. I'm a planner with the Nashua Regional Planning Commission. We do transportation, environmental, and land use planning for 13 communities in the greater Nashua and Milford region. I'm here along with Chris Buchanan, one of my colleagues from the Friends of the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail group, and he'll talk about himself in a moment. And also Mason Twombly, one of my coworkers, be working in the background to field your questions and make sure the webinar proceeds smoothly. So again, we will be taking questions at the end of our presentation, and you can use the Q&A feature. And also this webinar is being recorded. So Friends of the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail is a group that evolved out of our Nashua Region Complete Streets Advisory Committee, which is a group that meets regularly to discuss ideas and to plan for how to incorporate complete streets concepts into the transportation system in the Nashua region. And for those of you who haven't heard the expression complete streets, I would just say that they are streets that are designed and operated to enable safe access for all users, including motor vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities. Complete streets make it easy to cross the street, to walk to shops, and to bicycle to work. And among many other good things, they allow buses to run on time and make it safe for people to walk to and from train stations. So those of you who are familiar with the Route 101A corridor between Nashua and Milford, and also on the western end, that section that becomes Route 101 out near Wilton and Milford, you understand that's a very important primary east-west corridor in the Nashua region. It does a terrific job of moving motor vehicles, but a less than terrific job accommodating pedestrians and bicycles, and all other non-motorized alternative modes of transportation. It happens there's also an active railroad right-of-way that runs directly parallel with Route 101A and 101. And the Complete Streets Committee has been discussing the feasibility of developing a shared use bike ped path alongside that active rail line that would better accommodate bicycles and pedestrians and other alternative transportation modes, and of course, and continue to to support that rail line, that active rail line. It happens that the private railroad company that owns that right of way has put its holdings up for sale, and they are negotiating with a prospective buyer, currently and as we speak. So the Friends of the Souhegan Rail Trail Group has formed to advocate and plan for the possibility of incorporating a non-motorized shared use path alongside the rail line. And this group recognizes that a change in ownership of the right-of-way, and these are big companies, represents an exceedingly rare opportunity to work with the ownership and to advocate, and by doing so, to advocate and plan for the possibility of enhancing this transportation corridor. So Friends of this rail trail are, just for the record, are 100% supportive of the corridor remaining an active rail line. And it's exciting to think about how alternative transportation modes could coexist in this corridor. And I'd also add that, out at kind of the western end of that corridor, the Milford-Bennington Railroad, it operates between Wilton and Milford, and it's really a vitally important to the economy of the region. So, so all that being said, the objective for tonight is to provide background about trends in biped safety, a description of existing conditions in these corridors. We're going to talk a little bit about the organizational efforts of the Friends of the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail and how you could become involved with our efforts. So that's kind of our goal for tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris Buchanan, who's going to walk you through all the things I just talked about, all that information. So thanks.
Well, thanks, Matt. My name is Chris Buchanan. I am the chairman of the Amherst Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And as Matt mentioned, I'm also a member of the Complete Streets Advisory Committee in the Nashville region. And I'm also a fire captain in the town of Amherst, which I think is originally what led to my motivation to get involved with these sorts of things. I'm not an avid cyclist or anything like that myself, but it's the safety angle that really takes me to get involved with these sorts of things. So that's a little bit about me, but just one thing is if you want to visit our website or consider joining the organization, this is kind of one more opportunity to mention that you can go to souheganvalleyrailtrail.org. And if you want to join the organization or sign up for an email newsletter, you can do that at the /join URL. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about today are a lot of the things that Matt just touched on in a little bit of greater detail. One of them is to talk about what alternative transportation is, how it manifests in the Souhegan Valley region, and some of the things that we can do about it. And the general thing is to start with the vision of what the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail could be, and to go through the various benefits, configurations, segments, etc., for how to do that, as well as what a strategy could be to make such a thing a reality. So starting with the vision, we'll take a look at the need for alternative transportation in the Souhegan Valley region. So what is alternative transportation? I think though this year has been a very difficult one for a lot of people, there's one sort of surprising change that has happened, and that's the amount of people that you might see outside walking, biking, and other. There are all sorts of different ways that you can get around. There's recreational use of trails, which is usually what a lot of people associate these sorts of things with. But the reality is that transportation need not only be by car. And in fact, for a lot of people in this region, you cannot go by car, as we'll find out in a moment. So alternative transportation is really just providing different ways to get around the area. And we are not discriminatory of particular modes or anything like that. We're not making bike lanes. We're not selecting one thing to advocate for, but rather various ways to get around. So to talk about the need that I just alluded to, the reality is that this is a bit of a safety problem. In the United States, we build our roads for motor vehicles. This has been a trend that has been happening more and more since the 1930s and 40s as the car became king in America. The various engineering books that we use to design our roadways are principally designed to maximize the efficiency of motor vehicles and the flow of them. The consideration of safety, especially when it comes to non-motorized users of the roadway, is very much secondary, if not further down the list of priorities. Why this is a problem is based off of the laws of physics. So if we take a look at the energy that happens to be transferred when a person is hit by a car, this line shows up. You'll see at the top of this grid here is the various speeds that the car might be traveling, and the probability of fatality is there on the left. So at about 18 miles an hour or so, going up to about 35 miles an hour, the probability of fatality when a car hits a pedestrian goes up dramatically. Interestingly, the same trend occurs when a car hits another car, but as you're probably aware, cars have crumple zones and seatbelts and airbags and other things to protect us from that energy. So it takes the same sort of line that we see there, and it just moves it to a higher velocity. The product of this, though, is that we have three general categories that come out of this. And the left here is where if a car is to be kept below that line when it comes to speed, the chances of fatality are actually quite low. So it's generally safe to mix cars with people in those categories. Well, in that middle category, though, it is no longer safe to mix people with cars. And in this environment, it is best to separate the people from those motor vehicles. And then on the right, at this speed, it is best to separate even cars from cars by direction. And that's typically a highway environment. So these three categories of roads help us to think about how we ought to design our transportation network. And if we're to incorporate alternative modes in how transportation is to occur, we need to be thinking about these sorts of things. If you think about your neighborhood street, your cul-de-sac, something like that, where people don't drive very fast, it's probably fairly safe to mix cars with people there. But think about your transportation needs in this region. If you need to go to the post office or to get groceries or to go to a store or a friend's house, what streets do you drive on? Just think about that. And are they neighborhood streets only? If so, maybe you are all set right now, but chances are you actually have to drive across a lot of that middle category there, where if you wanted to walk or bike, some brave people, some very confident people can do that, but you probably wouldn't want your children to do it. You might not want to do it yourself because there is an objective risk of fatality if anyone is going to hit you. And as we know with statistics, unfortunately, this is an increasing trend. A lot of people blame this on distracted driving as a new trend in the United States, but the fatalities of pedestrians and bicyclists have been going up dramatically in the United States over the last decade or so. And this does somewhat directly correlate to the spread of cell phone use. So we'll see what the data ends up saying about that. But the reality is that the numbers are going up. And the deaths that happen as a result of this are getting pretty staggering. If we just look at this 10-year period, it's actually the equivalent to a 747 crashing with no survivors every single month in the United States alone. So it is a bit of a problem. And the reality is that some of us have the luxury to get in our car and drive around, and that's just not the case for everybody. So 25% of Americans do not have access to their own motor vehicle, or they cannot drive for one reason or another, whether that be because they are too old or too young, or they have a disability, or they cannot afford a car. There are various reasons why somebody might not have a car and might not be able to get around with that. One of the big factors of this is financial, that actually owning a personal vehicle is quite expensive, and some people cannot afford that. The statistics that we have obtained for the Souhegan Valley region is that the route that we will be discussing soon, within 2 miles of either side of that route, 3,000 households in our region do not have access to motor vehicles for transportation. So it really isn't just an inner city or somewhere else problem. Well, okay, there's a need established, but what about the benefits to having an alternative transportation corridor? Well, there is a study that actually just came out in the last year that took a look at a few different examples in the region and mostly the Eastern Seaboard. And the first thing is that investment into alternative transportation tends to lead to a greater return for local opportunities, local economy. If you think about the economy that surrounds motor vehicles, the cars tend to not be made in Hillsborough County, New Hampshire, and the fuel tends to not be made in Hillsborough County, New Hampshire, and the fuel tends not to be refined in Hillsborough County, New Hampshire. So a lot of the dollars that go into motor vehicle transportation actually leave the region or leave the country altogether. Alternatively, when it comes to investment into alternative transportation, statistically, the investment that goes into alternative transportation tends to be more local. Furthermore, the activity that happens as a result of having alternative transportation corridors in the region for commercial industry and other local businesses is that the people who utilize these sorts of transportation corridors actually make for exceptional customers. If you think about the numerous businesses that are along New Hampshire 101A and the speed at which you might drive through that corridor, do you know every single business that is there? And if you are a business owner there, do you think that everybody who drives by is paying close attention to your business and what you might be able to offer? It's one reason why sometimes you'll find very large signs on the side of 101A trying to entice you or let you know that the business is there. Driving by at 40 miles an hour or more it doesn't necessarily lead to great return. On the other hand, when you have people who bike right past your business at a much slower speed or even walk past it, it's those people have a longer period of time to see your business, envision themselves purchasing products and things of that nature. So there are a few studies that just take a look at the biker and walker as a customer, and they tend to be a better customer for local businesses than cars. Another study took a look at 35 miles of an alternative transportation corridor in Maryland, and the economic benefits of it were staggering. I'm not going to go into every line of detail here, but so as to say that the economic report indicated that building these sorts of facilities, it's not just something that people who bike might enjoy. There's actually a significant economic benefit to having these sorts of things in the area. Furthermore, maybe you don't own a business. How might it affect your house or the property value of your house? The U.S. Department of Interior did a study of 90,000 home sales over a fairly long period of time to take a look at walkability and bikeability as a factor in home sale and property sales to see what the return on investment was. And really, the biggest thing to say is that on average, the increased property value for home sales went from $4,000 to $34,000 if you were to sell a house in a bikeable or walkable area. There's a study that came out of Ohio that measured there's this measurable impact per square foot of being close to a rail trail. And a local study in northern Massachusetts along the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail indicated that in New England, if you are next to a rail trail, you can see up to 41% faster home sale on the market. Maybe this is a bit more obvious to some people that there are obvious benefits to using an alternative transportation corridor, especially when you're not driving instead. 33.8% of Americans are obese, and the opportunity to get out safely and move around can be quite difficult since we do not have pervasive infrastructure to do such a thing. So the benefits of having people be able to move around, they're there. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that these sorts of things foster a sense of community that other types of transportation simply do not. If you think about your experiences driving on 101A in rush hour, I don't know how that experience might go for you, but I wouldn't say that for me, it necessarily fosters a sense of community and looking to other people in the cars near me and thinking about how great it is that we're around each other is just not a factor. And this is probably one thing about road rage is when people are in cars, they tend to behave differently than in other environments. So just generally motorized transportation doesn't foster a sense of community. However, being able to walk past your neighbors, bike past your neighbors, you may see this if you walk around your house or anything like that. People tend to wave, talk to each other, and interact with each other. It's interesting. This is not the first time we've done this presentation, and frequently people talk prior to us putting it on about how they saw their neighbors in the street the other day and how nice it was to see each other. So this is a bit of an intangible thing, but the sense of community is definitely something that can be fostered. So we talked about the need, we talked about the benefits. Let's take a look at the route that was discussed by Matt a little earlier. This is the Souhegan Valley region. Over there on the right, you'll see Nashua, and then we have Merrimack in the upper right, and then towards the northwest is Wilton. This line that we see here is the Hillsborough Branch Rail Line. You've probably seen it if you've, I think it's probably most visible in Amherst, parts of Milford, but it directly parallels many parts of New Hampshire 101A. It also crosses Main Street in Nashua, so it's probably something that you've seen before. This rail line is owned by Pan American Railways, formerly Boston and Maine Corporation, and it is an active railway, and it has two different operators. You'll see here there are two different colors. This bluer portion on the east side is operated solely by Pan Am, and then that green portion on the west side is operated both by Pan Am and the Milford-Bennington Railroad. So the Milford-Bennington Railroad, as Matt had indicated, offers a shuttle service for the Granite State Concrete Company, I think it's called, and they shuttle raw materials from a quarry to West Milford along part of this. So it is an active rail line, and there's an example of it from this summer. Okay, so the rail line itself was reportedly for sale as of July 2nd, 2020. November 6th, 2020, the rail company CSX communicated to the U.S. Surface Transportation Board that they are intending to purchase the rail line. There was some resistance from some other competing railroad companies. They brought some complaints to the Surface Transportation Board, but my expectation would be that those complaints will not amount to much in the end. And the U.S. Surface Transportation Board is the federal regulatory agency that oversees rail line transactions such as these. So furthermore, what Matt had indicated is that as this rail line is about to change hands, very likely, that's an excellent opportunity for conversations to be had to discuss the prospect of having a shared use path, a rail trail incorporated into the right of way. There are various entities here, whether it be Pan Am, the current owners, CSX, the next owners, or even the Surface Transportation Board. Various parties are involved right now, and this is it's not the only time, but it's a great time to start that conversation. So what would a rail trail really be along this? Let's take a look at the concept. Well, the impact of what this route could offer is within 2 miles of this route, we have 115,000 people in this region live within 2 miles. There's 63,400 jobs. And I mentioned before, 3,000 households without any motor vehicle. So there are many things that are very close to this line. And the reality is that having an alternative transportation corridor along this rail line would be likely very transformational when it comes to the culture in the area. To be able to bike, walk, whatever it might be, over 16 miles through the heart of the Souhegan Valley would fundamentally transform the way the area is. It would be pretty amazing. It also would form as a backbone of the region in terms of municipal efforts for extending alternative transportation in their own communities. This would be a branch, a spine, something like that, that people could use as something to build off of. Well, we've been talking about it for a little while. Let's take a look at the route itself. This is the route from East Nashua to Wilton Center. We have broken it up into various segments that are based off of the local contexts and some engineering type of specifications that are appropriate for each section. No two places are exactly the same, and they might all have different needs. So let's go ahead and take a look at the east side here, that green portion in East Nashua. So on the east side of this, you'll see the route starts at 25 Crown Street, which is currently the host, it's where the New Hampshire Park and Ride is in East Nashua. And it's the prospective site of a proposed passenger rail station if the Capital Rail Corridor project happens. That's right where it would be, which would provide an opportunity for intermodal transportation. You could bike or walk to the train station, for example. You'll see there are some dotted lines there. One of them is the Heritage Rail Trail, which would directly connect to this. Going to the northwest here, this segment ends at Broad Street, and it also crosses Main Street. But at Broad Street, we go to the next section here, where this parallels a lot of the commercial businesses which exist in Nashua, Northwest Nashua, along the 101A corridor, as well as the Nashua Airport. So this would actually provide a direct access to many businesses along 101A from what we would see as the rear of those businesses right now because of 101A. This segment ends at Northwest Boulevard in Northwest Nashua, which is close to, there's a Market Basket there, a YMCA, a couple other businesses. I'll continue northwest, and this segment here crosses little portions of Merrimack and Hollis, and then it continues along the New Hampshire 101A corridor in Amherst. This segment, this proposed segment, ends at the intersection with New Hampshire 122, as that intersection would have special engineering considerations. And then I'll continue to the northwest, and we have this next segment, which would pick up at 122 and continue through Milford to Westchester Drive. This segment is, for me personally, pretty interesting because of the way that Milford is geographically set up. This rail line really bisects the town's population in a lot of ways. If you think about the people who live in Milford and wherever people live in Milford, most of them do not live very far from the rail line right now, offering a real special opportunity to connect the community with an alternative transportation corridor. It's already right there. And it also goes right next to the Milford Oval and the Granite Town Rail Trail, I believe it's called, in Milford. So at Westchester Drive and continuing westward, we have this last segment, which would go to Wilton Center. And this is also the segment where the Milford-Bennington Railroad operates. So those are the various segments that we've taken a look at for the proposed route. Continuing on, let's talk a little bit about what a rail trail really is. There are some engineering specifications for how they're designed from the AASHTO Green Book and some other federal guidance that is out there. But in general, what we're looking at would be a paved surface, an improved surface, as it's a transportation corridor. We're not necessarily seeking to have this be a recreational path primarily, but of course people could recreate on it. There are various configurations for how a rail trail can manifest depending on the usage of the rail line and how that ends up just being in the right of way. And some of them are to have rail with trail. And this is largely determined by the allowable space within the right of way. So if you're if your right of way is rather forgiving and you have plenty of width, there is a certain design. And then if your right of way is actually more constrained, then there are other designs that you can narrow up the way that rail lines can coexist with a rail trail. And a rail with trail might seem like a foreign concept. Really, rail trails might seem like a foreign concept for this region, but that's not really that unusual. So there's some examples of this in the area. So in Laconia, we have existing rail with trail already in operation. CSX, the likely buyer of this route, has a few rail with trail examples around the country, and it's really just not that unusual. On the right here, we have one that's actually being built this year in New York. So that's a little bit of what a rail trail is. I believe this is the last part of the vision. And so the strategy, how can you make something like this happen? There are various steps that really would have to occur. One thing is that an organization needs to be formed. Luckily, one exists now. It's the Friends of the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail. And again, it's something that you can join if you're looking to get involved, if you're interested in getting involved. Having an organization to represent this cause is going to be essential to go forward. It's not just the idea of one or two people, it's actually many people who are seeking to expand alternative transportation options in the region. Now that there's an organization, the organization needs to spread the word about it. That's what we're doing tonight, and that's what we hope to do more in the future. People have to know of the potential value of this alternative transportation corridor and what a rail trail can do for the Souhegan Valley. And that's the organization's job, to spread the word. Next would be that really there are several people that have to be on board with such a thing. The owner of the rail line, the operator of the rail line, the local and state governments, perhaps the Surface Transportation Board, all sorts of key figures, public officials need to be a part of this conversation and need to understand the value that it offers and to be on board with it in order for that to happen. After that, funding has to occur. Just like building roads, you can't just do them for free. Money has to come from somewhere, and we're currently investigating some federal funding opportunities that may occur in the next year or so. Whether that be a long-term effort through building little segments at a time, or whether there be a large grant that ever happens, there are various funding opportunities. It could even come down to some fundraising, but funding has to happen. Next, corridor access has to be obtained. You can't just build a rail trail on somebody else's land. That's not how anything works. And we know that the likely buyer of this rail line has plenty of experience working with rail with trail, and they need to be part of the conversation. And as soon as that transaction is official, it really isn't yet, we would hope to bring them in and have them be part of the conversation. But there are a lot of things that need to be put in order now from our organization's perspective, so that we're prepared for that conversation when it happens. And then assuming all of these things can happen, the last thing would be to actually make it a reality. A little bit of information about what the Friends of the Valley, Souhegan Valley Rail Trail, the organization itself, really this group was put together in the last 6 months, and the organization is seeking to do those various steps that I just listed. And the first meeting of that organization is going to happen in January, and that'll be the first Tuesday of the month at 7 o'clock. That's also later on. I have written it down if you need to see it again, but if you want to learn more about the organization or to get involved, you can go to souheganvalleyrailtrail.org. And we hope that you might spread the word about what this rail trail could offer, or how it might impact your life, or tell your friends about it. It's very important that as many people as we can are aware and involved with this initiative. We also have social media accounts. If you go to Facebook, you can search for us Souhegan Valley Rail Trail. There's also a Facebook group called the Friends of the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail, and we also have an Instagram account. So next steps, let's just take a look at what the future holds for this effort. Today, we're hoping that maybe some people who are attending this webinar might join the organization and help us out. There are various ways that people can help out. You don't need to be an engineer or a politician or, I don't know, a philanthropist. Everybody has something to contribute. So I really hope that perhaps you'll take some time to join. The next meeting that I mentioned for the organization will occur on January 5th. That's the first Tuesday of the month, and that'll be 7 o'clock. And during the pandemic, we'll be meeting by Zoom. So if you sign up for the organization, you'll get an email within the next couple of weeks to take a look at joining that meeting. In the near future, what we hope to do is to continue to spread the word about this initiative to other local organizations. We've already met with several municipal organizations, and we're looking to talk to some Rotary clubs soon and other groups. Maybe you know one that we should talk to, but that's one of the things that we'll be doing. Another thing is that as this likely transaction is to occur of the Hillsborough Branch Rail Line, it's an excellent opportunity for this organization to communicate with the various parties involved and to write letters and talk about how the inclusion of a rail trail within the right of way of this corridor would be an excellent thing for this region. Beyond that, there are plenty of things that we can do. The sale of the rail line is just a piece of this puzzle. This is a long-term effort, communicating with these various parties and making sure that this initiative has life over time is something that will take a while. And so there are many things that we'll be doing after that. And really the fact of the matter is normally these things take a very long time. And the fact that this transaction is, the sale is likely to occur means that unlike many rail trail initiatives, something is actually happening with the rail corridor, which is usually a great opportunity to do something. So those are the next steps. I would invite Matt and Mason back so that we can address some of the questions that you might have asked. We'll do our best to answer them. And so if you haven't tried yet, there's you hover over the screen, or maybe you didn't have to hover. There's a Q&A button at the bottom. Now's a great time for you to ask any questions you might have. In this webinar format, really the only way we can respond is if you go ahead and do that.
All right, so we're gonna start answering some questions now. The first question we have is from Beth Secor. Can this route be connected to the Nashua River Rail Trail?
So Chris, I'd answer that. So if one connection is from where the trail connects to the Heritage Trail in downtown Nashua. So you could travel along the Heritage Rail Trail and then connect along through Mont Falls Park along 111A and then down to the rail trail, the Nashua River Rail Trail from there. But there's going to be lots of planning in the future about how this network will work out, and so there surely will be other more direct connections down to the Nashua River Rail Trail, but that connection to the Heritage Rail Trail, that's a pretty good east-west connection through downtown Nashua, will be a key connection.
All right, thank you. So the next question we have is from Rick Kufri. What are the clearance issues within downtown Milford for a rail with trail cooperative corridor?
I'm not sure I understand.
Could you ask
the
that question
clearance
again?
issues.
Sorry.
I think so. He asked, what are the clearance issues within downtown Milford for a rail with trail cooperative corridor? I think he means the width of the right of way.
Yeah.
So one thing that we're hoping to do is to survey right-of-way along the route. We have some technology at our disposal to do that at the Nashua Regional Planning Commission, and that's one of the next things that we're hoping to do. We aren't here to engineer the project ourselves. We're really advocates and planners and people like that. So the engineering of it would be a separate phase, but we will have more information about the right-of-way as soon as we're able to do that with the Nashua Regional Planning Commission in the near future. So we don't have specific numbers for the width of the right-of-way right now. All I can really say is that we know that it is highly variable. In some places it is quite wide, in other places it is more narrow.
Okay, so there are a couple of other questions in here that relate to the width of the right-of-way, and that's pretty much as we can speak on that, right? Okay, so that I will just mark those as answered then. Peter Lyon, this is more of a comment. If time permits, please address the 101A and 122 crossing and the engineering mechanisms which would be needed for this very busy intersection.
Certainly. So one thing that we know about the crossing is that there are a couple of different configurations that are possible for the 101A, 122 crossing. A lot of it depends on what ends up happening with the rail line. We don't know what will happen. If CSX purchases the rail line and if they maintain it as an active rail corridor, which we're expecting them to do, then that means that the rail trail would have to go through a slightly different route. You are likely to know that the rail line goes diagonally across the intersection, and through the research that we've done with Federal Highway Administration guidance for crossing such a wide road and a rail line, there are two possible ways to do it that it recommends. One of them would be to have an underpass, which is indeed possible on the Nashua side of that intersection. The 101A corridor is actually quite high above the ground there. It was raised when the highway was built. So there's actually an underpass being put in Milford, maybe as we speak right now. But an underpass is one option there. The other one would be a different type of grade separated crossing. So to have a bridge or something like that would also be an option. There are some alternatives to that would involve including the traffic signals. These sorts of configurations for crossings would be less, they wouldn't be optimal like a grade separated crossing would be, but technically it falls in within the parameters of allowable crossing to have a conventional crossing occur at the intersection as well.
Okay, thank you. One question is, do you have an estimate of the total cost to implement the plan that you're presenting?
We've started to put the numbers together, and we have some data about some of the factors with that, but a lot of the specifics when it comes to pricing comes from an engineering study that would have to occur in the near future.
Okay. Have you connected with local bike shops and engaged their support?
I would, Chris, I can jump in on that one. And on our regional Complete Streets committee, which is formerly known as our Regional Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, we have two bike shops are represented on that committee alone. So, so yes, we have connected with some, and we will continue to reach out, to other stakeholders.
Okay. Sorry. So, the rail line is active. I noticed other rail trails pave over the tracks. Would this be happening?
Again, this would come down to what the future of the rail line is. Really, our organization is advocating for the inclusion of a rail trail within the right-of-way of the corridor, and how that would actually be built depends on the cooperation of the various parties at hand here, namely the owner of the corridor and the operator of the corridor. It's likely they'll be the same people, but the fact of the matter is our organization would not dictate to the owner what has to happen. Rather, it would be a collaboration. We would be working with them to find what works with the rail line and where it's appropriate to put a rail with trail or to put anything. And that's really how we would have to determine that. Some rail lines are abandoned, and then people remove the rail lines and things like that. I don't expect that that's really what's happening with this sale that is likely to occur. If the rail line were abandoned, then yeah, often you would just remove the ties and pave over it. But with a rail with trail configuration, you put it beside the rail line. So there are various ways to do this, and there's no one answer. It really has to do with what the needs of the right-of-way are.
Okay. This comment is, I didn't see what would actually be purchased. Are you buying the entire corridor or only 12 feet plus along the rails?
So I think that this question kind of gets to what is it we're going to do with this, and I would say that really just like the previous answer, that comes down to how the conversations go with the various parties. If CSX buys this route and they decide they don't want it or something like that, and they want to sell it, then that would be something that would be investigated. But the more likely outcome is that there would be a conversation with the future rail line owner, and they would talk about how they could see a rail trail being incorporated into the right-of-way, and that's where these sorts of questions would be answered. Is whatever is appropriate based off of the rail corridor owner's needs would dictate what the subsequent steps would be, whether that be an easement or purchasing land next to it, or that they would retain ownership and it would be built there with an agreement with the owner. These sorts of things have to come out of conversations, and it's not something that we either would dictate. It's not our land. It's not our job to do that. Nor could we say with high confidence how that would manifest at this stage in the game.
Okay. Is the goal for the rail trail to be paved like the Nashua River Rail Trail or hard packed like the Goffstown Rail Trail?
I would say that the goal for this is to be an alternative transportation corridor. And if it is to be an alternative transportation corridor, it is best suited to be a paved application. The reality is that we live in a cold climate place, and it's in order for transportation to occur year-round, it's hard to have access to a place if it's muddy or covered in snow or something like that. Having it be a paved route would be best for year-round use. It would allow for a plow truck to just drive right down it like it would any other street and things like that. It is most likely the best way that this could be. But once again, it's not our position to say necessarily how everything will or should be. Really, our hope is to make it an alternative transportation corridor, and the details of how that would actually come to be have to be revealed through a lot of conversations and working together with the various parties here.
Okay. Another question about how much of the right-of-way would be needed for the path.
What is the minimum needed?
So if I'm going to go fly backwards here. So this is from the New Hampshire State Trail Plan. And you'll see that there is on the right is our constrained width recommended guidance for how to build a rail with trail configuration. And from my research, I would say that this guidance is actually still fairly generous when it comes to how much space is required. The reality from what I have seen is that rail with trail configurations are actually, they do not require much space at all. Usually what happens is that you put a fence in between the rail line and the rail with trail route, and places can be quite close together. And strangely, even though a lot of the engineering guidance seems to indicate that fences are very important for this sort of thing, rarely are they actually used. A lot of the examples out there, just put them right next to each other. So, so as to say that there is guidance, and here it is, but also when width is really constrained, there is usually a lot of emphasis placed on the fence that separates. So you can actually get the two modes of transportation right next to each other. And if you have a fence, it's generally okay.
Okay. Sorry. There have been several companies looking to begin utilizing freight on the line post-sale. Has this been considered in planning with the rail with trail?
Well, I would just say, kind of following up, I think what we said earlier is that, that we're 100%, in favor of increased, usage of this freight line, and we're just, this is a dream here to make this happen, and the engineering and the the planning and the specific projects haven't happened yet. This is a concept, but absolutely part of that concept is we are aware of I could think of 4 or 5 right off the top of my head, manufacturers and distributors of various commodities and products are interested in using that line as a way to move their products. So the answer is that that will definitely be part of the consideration for any kind of planning we do in the future, and any projects that we might identify.
Have the current owners of the railway been approached in the past? And if so, what was their feedback? So I don't know, but if you guys know anything about that.
So we did reach out to Pan Am and give them a heads up a couple of months ago that that we were working on this and thinking about this, and that was even, I think, before we were aware that this property was going to be coming up for sale. So we did reach out, and we didn't really hear back a whole lot, is I guess my answer to that.
Next question is, what safety features will be set in place when a rail train is actively passing while pedestrians are using the rail line simultaneously, knowing they are parallel to each other?
So
Yeah.
there is a pretty clear guidance from both the Federal Highway Administration and the New Hampshire State Trail Plan for how to make such a thing safe, and it usually comes to the geometric design of how the layout is made, and there is a physical separation by a distance, and then usually there is a fence that is also incorporated in the design between the rail trail and the rail line. That being said, there has also been study done on how rail with trail has worked in the United States, and it's a surprisingly safe way to have an alternative transportation corridor. It's safer than putting a sidewalk on the side of a road. So if you think about the speed and frequency that cars drive by you when you walk on the side of a road or on the sidewalk or something like that. It is actually safer than a train. And there are engineering ways to make it safe, including that separation and fence. But even still, the use of the rail line is infrequent, especially when you compare that to cars that might drive down 101A, which is constant. And that's it.
Okay, the next question is, have you connected with the New England Mountain Bike Association, and do you know if there are any possibilities of building mountain biking trails along the route?
We haven't.
Nope, haven't got to that yet,
No.
but we will.
What have there been any studies done to gauge the impact to local wildlife with the trails?
Typically, environmental impact is part of an engineering study that we've alluded to a few times. We are not environmental scientists or environmental engineers. It's we can't say with confidence what an impact would or wouldn't be, but generally the impact would be consistent with that of the existing rail line. That this would be adjacent to or however the however the configuration is. It's just it would be the same route that we currently have. So we wouldn't be seeking to do anything dramatically different. But still, an environmental study has to occur as part of an engineering study.
Okay. The next question is, do we know the expected time frame that the CSX purchase would be finalized?
No, this is more or less unknowable. We know that they have filed with, they have sent communication to the U.S. Surface Transportation Board that they intend to purchase the route. But that could take just any period of time. It could be many, many months before that happens. It could actually be much sooner than that. It's just not something that we can know.
Okay. Have you considered long-term maintenance of the trail, and who would do that or pay for it, plowing and plowing in the winter?
Yes. So whenever it comes to making an alternative transportation corridor, it's very similar to a road. In fact, the engineering is almost identical to a conventional road. So the way that these things are built, it depends on who ends up owning the corridor and how they want that to be. So a lot of that comes down to the legal arrangement that comes out of how a rail with trail configuration would be, for example. Let's say that CSX purchases the route and they permit a rail trail to exist alongside the route. There are many ways they could do that. They could sell that portion. They could provide an easement. They could make agreements with, for example, the state of New Hampshire, so that it would be a DOT corridor. There are so many different options that it's very difficult to say exactly how they could be. I would more or less be trying to predict the future, which I'm not too good at. But the standard arrangement is just like any road. These don't have special maintenance specifications when it comes to things like plowing, things like that. It's just like you take a plow truck, you drive right down it. So about long-term maintenance, one thing that is a little interesting about this is that asphalt roads in New Hampshire and in our hot, cold climate that we have here tend to last between 20, 35 years for a standard road when you have heavy vehicles driving on that road. And it's usually accelerated. The deterioration of that road is usually faster when you have trucks or heavy equipment using the road. Conversely, the opposite is true when you do not have heavy machinery using your road, a la people walking or bikes or something like that. So the longevity of an asphalt rail trail is actually significantly longer than a conventional road. Furthermore, one of the proposals that is incorporated into this idea is to use a hot mix polymer asphalt colorant, which prolongs the longevity of the road itself to be a certain percentage longer. So the maintenance is surprisingly little.
Okay. The line runs through the granite state concrete where there is much truck traffic and as well as the Milford Bennington switching. Would the trail need to be diverted along 101 to avoid safety issues?
Probably not. When it comes to the coexistence of rail with trail, the safety of or any safety issues of being next to a rail line are consistent throughout, whether there's switching occurring along the rail line or whether a particular facility is being serviced by the rail line. The risk does not increase or decrease in that area necessarily along just a transportation portion of the rail line. Nevertheless, there are these engineering criteria, as I've mentioned a couple of times, such as this, which are to provide safety for rail trail users alongside an active rail line. And the same engineering specifications would be used along any portion of the rail line in order for to maximize safety.
Okay. What may be some incentives for the rail owner and operator to work with us to make it easier to get their purchase approved, I guess?
I think that's an excellent question. And it's a good question for someone who should join the organization, really. When it comes to making these sorts of things happen, creative solutions have to be produced. The reality is that if you want to have a rail line along an active rail corridor or along somebody's railway right of way, they have to want to do it. And if there's no incentive to do it, then it might be a really tough sell. It depends on the party and how they're feeling when it comes to this and the right of way, all sorts of different things. But there are various ways to try to motivate the landowner and the rail operator to be involved and engage us, and coming up with creative solutions for how to do that, aside from just having infinite money, which is always just a nice thing to have, that is also impossible. These sorts of ideas have to be produced, and that's one of the points of this organization, to come up with ways to incentivize having a rail trail and to do the research for how that can be advantageous for the landowner, and et cetera. We don't have specific answers, but there are some out there that we already know about.
Okay. Do you have a cost and timeline approximately for the environmental and engineering studies?
We do not at this time.
Okay. And then there was one comment from Tom that said, talk a little bit more about the organization, the Friends of the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail, and where did the logo come from?
So the Friends of the Souhegan Valley Rail Trail was inspired by several existing organizations. I'm trying to go back to the end. Several organizations around the state. There are several Friends of the Insert Rail Trail Here organizations that currently exist, and we see that as a model that has worked for other rail trails around the state. It's comprised of a group of people who are just motivated to make this sort of thing a reality, who understand the vision of alternative transportation in the region and what it could mean for us. Some of the members are avid cyclists, others just want to walk. There's some that are like me, who are just like engineering nerds, all sorts of different people. The logo itself, I made the logo, and it's inspired by existing logos out there for a lot of trail projects. So I adapted an existing logo for trails for our purposes.
Okay. That is all the questions that we have. So if anybody has any last minute questions, feel free to submit. But if we don't get any in a couple of seconds, we'll probably call that the end. And if Matt or Chris, if you have any closing remarks you'd like to give, I guess now's the time.
No, just, thank you for joining us. And we are, this is a work in progress. And we welcome anybody that wants to provide, additional input, give us a call, just reach out to us. And our moving forward, we know that this, the webinar format, is a little bit impersonal, but our motivation for that was to really try to, just to provide information about, what this quarter is like, and, just our perception of what is possible. But we are talking about this, and we, we're looking to move, whereas we still want to do informational presentations to anybody that would like to hear them, any group or what have you. We do want to move forward and, be more engaging, that we think this is hopefully the beginning of a grassroots kind of effort, and grassroots means being able to talk, face to face and so on. So, we do want to do that, and we encourage you to reach out and to us personally, and perhaps our committee meetings that will be the first Tuesdays of the month is going to be an opportunity to do that. That will be Zoom, at least initially. Still will be Zoom, and it will be a meeting, not a webinar. So that's going to be an opportunity to be more involved, more directly, and have conversations. So that's what I would say.
I don't have any other questions in Q&A, so I guess.
All right.
Well, thank you for joining us, everybody.
Definitely. Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you, and have a great night.
All right.